Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. It's 2 o'clock right now, and I'm going to get started in just a couple minutes to give everybody a chance to log on. So bear with me. We'll be getting started soon. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Cronin Finalist Webinar Series. Each year, NASPO hosts this webinar series to recognize states who have submitted outstanding state procurement initiatives that are recognized at our annual conference each year. The George Cronin Awards program seeks to recognize these initiatives by encouraging adoption of these programs and projects in other states. Submissions for these awards are scored based on 4 criteria, which are innovation, transferability, service improvement, and cost reduction. By filling in these key areas, the Cronin Awards and their finalists help create opportunities for improving the procurement profession nationwide. This webinar series is an important part of sharing these ideas, so I want to thank you all for joining us today. So before we get started, I want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded, and it will be available on our YouTube channel on our website within the next couple of days. And because we are recording, I've muted everybody, but if you have a question, there will be a Q&A time at the end of the presentation. You'll see at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A tab. If you click on that, you can submit your questions throughout the presentation at any time, and I will address those during the Q&A section at the end. If there's any of you that would like to receive UPPCC certification credit for attending this webinar, you can email me, Stephanie Schlueter, at sschlueter@nasco.org, and I'll also put that in the chat box at the bottom of the screen. So just email me and I'd be happy to send you a certificate. So now I would like to introduce our speaker today, Dustin Crossfield. Dustin is the Director of Technology Services for the state of Oklahoma, and today he'll be speaking on his state's award-winning submission on Innovate Oklahoma. And today, Dustin, the floor is all yours.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity. Hope everyone can hear me okay. So I'm just going to jump into it here real quick. So anytime we're doing kind of a fun new thing, I always like to start with a really boring first slide. But this is really what we've been talking about in Oklahoma for the last 3 years, was how do we start leveraging technology to really transform the way that government works. And so as we kind of started doing that, I started looking for other states that were really doing digital transformation. How were they actually putting these things in? And if you start to read a lot about that, what you find out pretty quickly is you kind of have to go across the oceans to find people that are leading this. Even states, I think, are considerably behind other countries. And that also helped us a little bit in Oklahoma because it helped us. We could find someone that looks more like us sometimes. So the next thing we kind of said was Oklahoma's technology, it isn't better than Estonia's, but it could be. This story is a whole lot more fun if you don't know anything about Estonia. Some of you probably already do, but if you don't, it's a small Baltic country, former Soviet republic, really has a tortured past. They were... their whole history, they just get overrun by the Germans, the Russians, even the Finnish have overrun them several times. So when they gained their independence in 1991, from 91 to now is the longest period they've had of independence totally. And so we started looking at Estonia and thinking, well, maybe they're better to look at. So a lot of times in Oklahoma, we're a small state, we're a pretty poor state. And when I compare myself to other states, sometimes we get a little bit of a complex and we think, well, maybe, Texas is bigger than us or California. Estonia measures up a lot better to us and says, okay, so I'm bigger than them. I'm wealthier than they are. I have almost never been overrun by the Russians. It's better in almost every way to be an Oklahoman than an Estonian, except for this one thing. In Estonia, they can register any sort of business in under 12 minutes. In the state of Oklahoma, our governor asked us about 5 years to do that. We're not even close to the 12-minute mark. I can do it for an LLC now, but what happens in the state of Oklahoma is I've got a number of different organizations that have to play a role in that. They're all on separate systems. So they can do this one thing that we can't. Except when you go and look at it, they can do an entire list of things that we can't. Their electronic IDs are amazing. Digital signatures, digital docs, the government runs all of that. The banking sector, everyone else just bolts onto it. They were the first to go with true internet voting. Their data integration, they have an e-police app that if you call the police via your app, it's almost like Uber. It automatically shows you the policeman that's coming your way and you can communicate with them. Their e-prescription application has actually, they don't have an opioids problem there anymore. And they did it with software. But all these different things that you can do in Estonia, you log on to one government website with one ID, and you can check on how your kids did in school, pay your parking tickets, check on your taxes, see how your cabinet member or your representative, how he voted and what he did during the day, all of those things in one place. So it became clear to us pretty quickly, our friends in Estonia are burying us in Oklahoma. But the story's actually a little worse than that. So the Estonians, as it turns out, when the Russians leave you, they don't leave you with a whole lot. We talk about legacy technology. Man, I'll tell you what, I can't imagine what that's like for those guys. That's really legacy technology. But what they did in Estonia was they figured out pretty quickly that this internet business may be something they want to keep doing. So they, instead of, as they built their e-government solution, they did it completely in a public-private partnership. And what's happened as a result of that is their economy has been booming for the last 25 years. They're one of the only European countries that has not went through recession when the rest of the continent did. You can see all the numbers that are up there around patent growth and their GDP growth. Big companies have come out of here. A lot of you probably know the Skype story a few years back. That was an acquisition of a few $1 billion, I believe, that Microsoft paid an Estonian company for that. When NATO needed to put in a cybersecurity defense facility, they chose Estonia because they already had all the people, they had everything they needed to go. So not only are they beating us on the technology front and really using e-government in a way that's dramatically changing the way their citizens interact with their government, they're doing it in a way that's driving economic benefit to them in a way that we certainly have never done. So I spent a lot of time reading about how they did it. And what was interesting about it is they never talked about legacy technology. They talked about legacy thinking was what they had to change. They knew they wanted a culture of innovation at the center of everything they did. They went out and made sure they had leadership support and plenty of public-private partnerships. And then they came in and put that tech leadership in to say, this is what we're going to do as a country, and here's how we're going to do it. The interesting point of this, the actual goal of this, was not e-government. It was actually economic development in their tech sector. They just got a byproduct of arguably one of the top e-government solutions that we've seen out there anyway. So it's interesting to see how they did it. So we started to look at it here in Oklahoma and say, okay, so how does that marry up for us? And so we said, well, let's start with where Oklahoma is. And so this is what I always call kind of my ugly slide. So there's two things that we looked at here. Where we ranked in e-government was, and I think that these numbers are a little bit old. I think we've moved up to 45th this year, so that's good. But it's still not exactly where we want to be. If you look at the state new economy index rank, what's interesting about that is we're 48th. Again, I think we rose up to like 46. There's a more recent one that just came out, but still not very good. The state new economy index looks at how well your economy is positioned to take advantage of tech industry's growth, and as we move to AI and automation, all those things, how well is your economy situated to take care of those? Clearly, our state is behind. And probably the worst news on this slide is this precipitous drop. We're going the wrong direction. But given all that, we actually have a couple of reasons to be optimistic. And one of them is around, we've spent the last 5 or 6 years going through IT consolidation, which is pretty much wrapped up at this point. And because of that, I think we have a lot of reasons to be optimistic. We see that we have 3 problems now. I have a state government tech debt problem, legacy, lots and lots of legacy stuff. I'm sure there's a lot of people on this call that can feel me on that one. We just talked about my e-government rating is pretty low, and I'm really lagging behind. And then also my tech economy in Oklahoma is small. Now, it's interesting, it's really growing. Oklahoma City and Tulsa specifically have done a lot of work in this area. And so although it's small, it's really starting to grow, and it feels like it can reach that point of critical mass and can kind of start turning into a positive feedback cycle. It needs a little push, though. What's interesting about all 3 of these problems is if you really focused on just one of those problems, but you did it in a smart way, you could probably accidentally make a whole bunch of progress on the other 2. And, you know, at heart, I'm kind of a lazy guy. You know, they always say if you give a hard problem to the lazy guy, he'll find the easiest way to do it. Some of that's kind of true for me. So we looked at that and said, well, how could we attack this in a way that maybe I could make gains on all 3? And so what we came up with was what we now call Innovate Oklahoma. And it's really about engaging the entrepreneur community to help us build digital government. And so at its heart, it's actually a pretty simple process. What we do first off is we go out and we call them challenges, and we submit a challenge. And that can be anything. Citizens will send these in. Most of the better ones actually come from the agencies themselves, and our IT people actually out there working. So they may say, this is a better way to do that. I've got this problem. Once we do that, we issue it out there to our entrepreneur community. And we basically tell them, if you guys think you have a better way to do this, please tell us about it. And they'll send in what they think the solution is. And some of these solutions, when they come in, are really bare bones. Others are really well thought out. But one way or another, we go through all of those, and our team looks at all of them. We rank them. We do it very transparently. And at the end of it, we come back and find 1, sometimes 2, that we think there's some merit to them. And at that point, we ask those entrepreneurs to come in and start meeting with our teams. And we call this the collaboration process, where we actually sit down and we work on, okay, so you say you're going to do it this way. Are you aware of IRS 1075? Oh, no, what's that? Well, your solution isn't going to meet compliance, so you have to architect it like this. And we actually start bringing in the end users, the business users, to say, this seems pretty cool. What do you guys think? And after all of that, if we think we still have something workable and everyone's still excited to move forward, The next step is we call it the Biz Lab. And this is where we bring in, there's actually another state agency here in Oklahoma whose mission is to support entrepreneurs that are starting new companies, especially around technology. We call it OCAST, the Oklahoma Center for the Advancement of Science and Technology. So these guys actually help work with this new company to look at their business model. They actually go through and can do an evaluation and a valuation of the company that says, hey, it looks like you're going after a market opportunity that's $10 million. If you make the assumption that you're going to get a 10% market rate, it's probably $1 million. This is what that business would be worth if you were successful. They help them with funding, marketing. They help them identify gaps in their management teams, all those sorts of things. Once it goes through all of that, the next step is we can actually sign a contract with them right there. So notice that there's no RFP process in here. We never went out there and did anything like that. We actually have the ability in Oklahoma that we can go out, find that solution, and our CIO can designate that contract as a statewide enterprise program that now any of our customers can purchase off of, and we can use that service or product or whatever it is. So we were pretty excited when we first started this. And of course, when you first do it, you get all kinds of crazy ideas, and it was difficult to start, okay, which one of these are really actionable? Which one of these can happen? So we're pretty excited that we have two now. The first one that we did is actually the guys that built the Innovate website for us out of the box. And the second one is probably more interesting. This Activos one is one that's going live right now. In Oklahoma, we have a big problem with, if you look at our child care and what we call our Department of Human Services, those guys these are the teams that are called in the middle of the night to come out. They drive out to an address. They drive up and they see there's a policeman there, and they've got kids in the back of the car, and mom and dad are going to jail. There's been a meth lab maybe in their house. It's the worst night of this kid's life. The way that it worked before Activos, the child care worker would pull up, and they could use their computer to attach to a mainframe web-based program, and they could get some information. But what they really want to do at this point is find a home to take these children, to put them into custody, to get them back inside a home. They don't want to have to take them back to one of these facilities. They have to. Today's process, it takes them days to find that. So what happens is these kids are taken probably many miles away from their home, especially if they live in a rural area. And it may take them a week to find them a more permanent home. Meanwhile, the kids have missed school. They've had to change schools. They may be too far away for grandma and grandpa to come do visits. I mean, this is really a bad deal. And it may take another week to find them a permanent home, and then we put them in that house. With this new technology, it's really simple. The child care worker can use their phone or their computer, whatever they have. They can log in, and all they do is put in the child's address. And then they can start sorting just like you do on Amazon. So you can say, okay, so I need a house near here. Okay, I need one in the same school district. I'll show different maps will show up. Hey, the child has a cat allergy. I need a house with no cats. You can do that over and over until you finally get it down to the list of potential candidates that you want. And then as soon as you do that, I can hit one button to send each one of the people on that list a phone call and a text message that basically says a child's in need. Please respond with yes if you're able to help. That's all they have to do. So now the agency can immediately reach out to those families, and we think we can find a house for the child now in a few minutes, something that took weeks before. Now the child can probably stay in their same school district, so they can go to school tomorrow. They can, if you stop and think about all the money that DHS was spending beforehand of sending emails, and they had a whole team of people that was responsible for doing this, this thing just takes all of that away and really takes all the friction out of that transaction, so you can get it there very, very quickly. The other interesting thing about this, as we showed this to our DHS customers, the first thing they took out was like, oh my gosh, we're very interested in why people said no. We never thought about this when they were looking at the app. We now have this steady stream that they can actually start looking at who said no. Where was I unable to find a house with, it turns out they're out trying to recruit foster parents every day, but they're just trying to recruit foster parents. This tool now gives them the ability to look and say, oh, I need a foster parent in the city of X with no cats that can take kids between 5 and 6. Before, they were just looking for foster parents of all kind. Now they can look through the program and say, who hasn't participated? It costs about $2,500 a year to keep a family in the foster care system, to keep them updated and all those things. If there are families out there that simply they're just not in an area that we're ever going to need them, it makes sense to drop them from the program so we can afford to go add some other people to it. So it turns out one of the biggest selling points, and probably long-term a benefit we didn't think we were going to get, was really just all the data that we're able to collect on this. So these are a couple of early wins that we're really excited about, that we think prove that the program is going to work and that we should be excited about it going forward. So I still say, what if we did? And what would that mean for the state of Oklahoma if I could have, I've done 1 or 2 of these deals now, but do I think I can do 5 or 10 over the next year or 2? I think I can do 5 or 10. On a 5-year basis, what would it look like, though, if I had 10, 20, 30? What would 50 look like? What would that mean for our, if I had 50 new tools, much like Estonia had, for my citizens to use? What would that mean for my state government's economy if there were 50 new startups that not only were they doing some work for Oklahoma, but they found a market for themselves, and they're doing stuff in your states or for other cities and counties? If my cities had 50 new startups that were renting office space, what would that mean? And I say, well, I don't know. We kind of go back to what I said earlier. Would I still be 48th or 46th? No, I think I'm going to go up considerably. But at the end of the day, I don't know that I care that much, because in reality, I think that in our global environment that we live in today, I'm not competing with Arkansas or Texas or Kansas. I should be competing with Estonia. So that's kind of what we're doing now. I'd like to open it up for questions, if that's okay.
Sure. So we have a couple questions so far, and please feel free to submit even more questions as we continue through the presentation, or if any of these questions may spark additional questions. So here's the first one. Since there is no RFP process, is there any type of mandate that allows for facilitation for Oklahoma to do the bidding process that way?
So the way that we do it, it's not necessarily a bidding process on this. What we end up doing, it's got a few rules around it. We're never looking for enterprise-wide things. So if someone says, oh, we need a new SAP or PeopleSoft, that isn't what we're talking about. This is for the much smaller apps and capabilities that a single agency may need. So that's the first thing. The second thing is for them to go through this program, there's an entire, we have a governance board put together that reports to the CIO. There's a number of steps they have to go through to make sure that it's not just one person making that decision. But at no point is there ever a bid in the traditional sense or an RFP. And we've had to work very, very closely with our state procurement director, who's, by the way, just an amazing guy, and we appreciate him a whole bunch here, because we have to go check with them a whole bunch to make sure, hey, this is what we're doing. Does this still meet all the requirements we want to make sure that we have a transparent and fair process. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Okay, great. I have another question here. Could you have used a statement of Could you have used a statement of objectives and an RFP? How did you do price analysis? Well, this is a 3-part question, so let's start with the first part. Could you have used a statement of objectives and an RFP?
So we certainly could have. Part of the process on this, so here's my problem with the statement of objectives in the RFP. Besides the fact that it takes a pretty long time to do, is the first place that we're really trying to shorten that time. So we didn't want to go through a very formalized process. The second thing is oftentimes these aren't things that there's a solution in the marketplace for. So doing an RFP it's just going to be custom development and custom all the other stuff, which tends to be expensive, and I got to pay all the upfront costs and I take all the risk. There's a whole bunch of small companies out there that want to form. Their problem is they don't have a problem to solve. So what's cool about this is this gives us an ability to have them solve that problem. And then at the last piece of that, when we talk about price negotiation and price analysis, again, these are typically things that we're developing out of the box. The one place that I look at is what would it cost me to build this? And we use that as kind of the benchmark for what am I going to buy this from the vendor at. And then at the end of the day, we're looking for software as a service. I want to make sure I don't, I want to make sure that everyone's getting what they're supposed to get, but that there's a fair price at that SaaS. But although I will tell you that becomes much more a matter of, hey, does this seem like this software solution is going to provide that amount of value? Do I have an ROI on it? So that's really more where the price analysis goes. I hope that,
okay.
If that didn't answer your question, shoot in another one, please.
Okay. All right. And the other part from that same person's question is, did your laws exempt the challenge submissions from the Open Records Act /FOIA?
Nope. They're all still in there. All of the submissions would still be subject to open records. Almost all of our submissions, just so you guys do know, we actually do, if you make a submission, not all of them make it to the website. We get I'm sure your states are different, but in Oklahoma, if you just open something up for anyone to give you an idea, you get some interesting ideas, but ones that we feel pretty comfortable telling people we're not going to probably move forward on those. So only about 10% of what we ever get through the vetting process to get put out there as challenges. Most of the other ones are either too broad or they're illegal, or you get a lot of, I'm sure a few people on here have done something where they put something out for citizens to be able to post on it. You get interesting remarks back. So that's kind of how we do it.
Okay. Looks like we have one more question so far, and that is, how did you mitigate risks while doing business with startups?
Oh, okay. This is a great question. So and I think this may be one of the most interesting parts. In the presentation, and I do a similar version of this presentation we spent a lot of time out there in the entrepreneur community. And I said, hey, there's that whole thing where it says the first step is you have to think differently, right? Kind of that Apple thing. And I teased them. I said, oh, you guys thought you meant I was going to be the one that thinks differently, but I'm probably going to challenge you more. So one of the biggest worries is that we get a small company, 2 or 3 people, and they build some amazing application that we roll out, and multiple agencies are using it every day, and it's really become an enterprise critical app for that business at some point. And now these 3 people, they get in an argument over something, and the company's broke up, and it just goes away, and now I'm left holding the bag. I mean, that's the reason in procurement that we spend so much time making sure that we vet the vendors, that we have people that are going to be stable, right? I'm kind of going around that. So we put some things in place. Instead of typically on a software deal, you do like a code escrow is normally one of the ways we get around that risk. Here, I actually ask them, if you want to use our contract, they may have to build their environment. For Activos, for instance, actually builds all of their stuff inside my cloud. And contractually, if they go away or fail to perform, I don't take over the code. I can actually just take over the entire site and operate it myself. We work with them so we know what technologies they've used to build it. So I know I could support it internally if I had to. Don't want to, but if I had to. So we actually go through, there's some interesting stuff around alleviating risk. And so far that's worked out very, very well. Now we haven't had one of our entrepreneur companies fail yet, and so we haven't had SC jump in before. But absolutely, if you're going to do something innovative on the front end, all those other problems that the reason the RFP process and all those things are there and they're in place and we use them for stuff is they do a great job of making sure that we manage the risk, making sure that it's fair, making sure that it's transparent. If I'm going to do it in a different way, we've really taken a lot of time to make sure that we still cover those bases. So we think risk-wise, we've done a good job on that, although we haven't had one fail yet. So maybe I need to come back and talk to you after we have one fail and let you know how that went.
All right. Well, we do have a few more questions, but I'm going to pause here and let you continue on. But don't worry, guys. I will get right back to those questions. So, Justin, I'll let you continue, and then we'll get back to the Q&A.
Okay. Well, I see there's a couple over here. Do you want me just to read from the ones that I can see in the chat?
Sure, if you want to. Yeah, if you want to.
All right, cool. Well, I see one here from Mark who's asking about a small group of vendors hogging the system. Mark, I wish you would have asked me that question before we went live with this. That was actually a huge problem right out of the gate. When we first started launching this, we started talking to, we have a bunch of business incubators, a bunch of shared workspaces. We have a bunch of user groups that meet. And what happened is we went out there and did that. There was one particular group of folks, and they were a small, it's kind of a shared desk workspace, but they get a whole bunch of tech companies in there, and they do a lot of events. And this program resonated. This place was called Star Space, and it just resonated with Star Space people. And so for the first few months, probably 80% of all the interactions, everything I had was coming from this one group out of one city. And we really had to take a hard look at what am I going to do? And what we really did was we stopped focusing on areas that were already coming. We quit talking to them as far as going out and trying to prep them. We hopefully were still talking to them about their ideas, but we quit going out there and doing marketing campaigns with them. We started focusing on other people. So we've had to be very careful that we make sure that one group of people doesn't get super fired up and that you can kind of spread this around. But at the same time, we had to fight. This group of people was excited about it and they were doing the work on it. So we still continue to have to balance that. So that is a great question, Mark. Next question is from Phil. Can you describe the governance organization you have in place? Yeah, so we actually, first off, it reports that it's a CIO advisory council. So they don't vote necessarily, just make recommendations, but we've got several other agency heads along with some members of the private sector that are on that. And they're the ones that kind of go through and make those recommendations back to the CIO. And again, we think that's important. One, for buy-in from all of our customers and the entrepreneur community. It makes it more transparent because now we see a little more why, and it's not just two guys inside that run Innovate making all the decisions. So that's been a very important piece that we've put in place. At the end of the day, the CIO makes the final decision, however. But I will tell you, I'm not aware of a situation where the CIO has made a call other than what the governance board, the advisory council, recommended. And I'll also tell you that governance organization has changed a lot. We have a new governor now and is likely to change even more in the coming months. I don't see any other questions.
I have a few more questions. If you want me to go ahead and give them to you now, I can, or it's up to you.
Yeah, I'm good with doing more.
Okay. So let's go with is the quote unquote challenge considered a request for information?
Again, we have what a challenge is. It's the opposite. A challenge. I guess it's kind of analogous to an RFI. Basically, what a challenge is it says, okay, I'll give you a good one that we had. In the state of Oklahoma, if you want your birth certificate, you have to drive to one of the health department county offices and fill out a form and do all this stuff to get your birth certificate. One of the challenges was someone just wrote in and said, I hate that. I want to be able to get it by my phone. That was it. That's his challenge. He wants to use his phone to get his birth certificate. And that's actually seems like a doable thing. So we put that out as a challenge, say, what would you do? And we probably had legitimate responses to that, probably 3 or 4 people that said, well, you should do it this way. You do get a few existing vendors that'll the IBM folks or whatever kind of, hang out and watch all those too. So you'll get the traditional vendors. Just so you know, traditional vendors can't come through the Innovate program. This is for startups. The goal of my program is to create startups. I hope those startups are doing things that give us really cool, cost-effective technology tools that my agencies and citizens can use, but the goal is still the startup. So as you go through it, if you start to use that as the reason that you're moving forward is to actually help create the startup, that changes a little bit how you think about that, I think. I hope that answered your question.
All right. Here's another question. Did you custom build your ideation platform, or did you buy COTS?
So, another great question. We looked at a whole bunch of them, and if you've done it as well, which it sounds like you have, you know they're expensive. I told you that first one that we bit, which was Activos. They actually built ours from the ground up. It does some cool stuff. It does some... Their ideation platform, what kind of separates it a little bit is they actually are using some of the social components so that entrepreneurs, as we go through the rating of them, oftentimes it'll be just one person that sent it in. Well, I have a hard time. You're going to need someone with marketing. You're going to need someone with different kinds of skill sets. So we kind of initially can actually respond to them in the tool and say, your team looks a little skinny. Maybe you should, hey, here's some people that are already registered that have those skills. Maybe you should come together to do that. So we actually went to, the company's name was Activos, that we've ended up going with through the initial phase of it. I will tell you, having looked at almost everything else out there in the market, there's a number of other good ones that I don't want to get into the specifics of which vendor, but there's a couple of large leading ones that I will tell you, there's many days we wish we would have went with. So I definitely don't know that I would recommend going and saying build your own. That'd be just from our experience.
Okay, great. So this next question is kind of a loaded question, so I'm going to break it up for you. So the first part of this question is a model contract publicly available, and what is the contract type? For example, labor hours or fixed price, indicative fixed price, or agile. That's the first half of the question, so I'll let you take that.
Yeah, so first off, it depends. On purpose, we don't come into it with any, all contracts have to be exactly like this. So each one of them is custom. That's the pain point. We hope that everything we do is software as a service, so it makes the billing and contracting a whole bunch easier. So I don't want to, like, for instance, I'm not going to pay you to develop the software. I don't want your code. You're going to need, for instance, one of the first things that we'll get from entrepreneurs is like, well, how are you going to pay for me to, my initial build costs? I need $100,000 to build this the first time. Welcome to be an entrepreneur, sir. You need to go find funding. Now, we do have our partners at OCAST and others that can help them with that, but that isn't how we buy things. You guys have to go build it and set it up, and then I am more than happy to be your first customer. The state of Oklahoma, my agency, will put exactly $0 into helping you start your company. I'll be your first customer. That's all I can offer you. Once we do that, the software as a service models, those contracts are usually pretty straightforward. It's per seat or per license or per one thing or another. As far as model contracts that are publicly available, I would have to get back to you, but I would be more than happy to follow up with the hosts here or with NASPO, and I can get with our procurement folks, and I'm sure there's a way that we can share those. Okay.
The second part of that question is, when do you get to a fixed price during the contract? And how is the budget or appropriation structured to give needed flexibility?
So how do we get to a fixed price? I don't know that I totally answer the question. I mean, how it's priced is absolutely a negotiation. And if you, see if I can make it to the right slide. If you look at that, we're actually talking about what the price point would look like all the way from step 2 all the way up into launch. So that is usually a huge part of this when you're talking about money, is what is it going to be? So the negotiation kind of starts and goes through the entire process. Again, I'm not sure if you meant something specific when you said fixed price. But again, these contracts are typically, being software as a service, they're usually just monthly or annual licensing fees, and we actually prefer monthly. And I think that may have just answered only the first part of that question. Did I miss a part?
How is the budget structured to give needed flexibility? That was the last,
yeah.
last
Okay.
part.
So as far as the budget goes, again, here in the state of Oklahoma, I work for a centralized IT organization. So most of my services become pass-through, if you would. I'm providing this service to an agency. So these are typically, and especially in this space, these are relatively small buys, under $100,000 a year total spend. So these are the kinds of things that the agency has to go out, and if this is something they want to do, they're going to have to find the money for it, and they're actually the ones that issue the PO and do all those things. They buy it from us. It's a kind of a weird agreement, but we actually bill them for all the IT services, but they're the ones that have to give us the PO and to make all those arrangements beforehand. I hope that answers your question.
All righty. And moving on to our next question. How did you get buy-in, and who was the sponsor?
So this was another fun thing about here in the state of Oklahoma, and one of those reasons that I love my job. This started out as a slide deck. It actually started out as this slide deck. It's a little different in its first stage. And I showed a couple people, including the state CIO and the state purchasing director. And they both got excited. And they said, we think we can do this. This is a great idea. And a couple weeks later, I was presenting this deck to the governor of the state of Oklahoma at the time, Mary Fallin. And she got excited about the idea. And a few months later, it took longer to schedule the press conference than it did to do a lot of the other things. She announced it as a governor's initiative. So it is super helpful to have the governor take your idea and attach their name to it as far as to get buy-in. That's a big first step. But the truth is, everyone that we showed this story to really gets fired up about it, and they want to get engaged, and they think if you're showing it to an agency personnel, they have a problem they want you to look at. If you're showing it to entrepreneurs, they're seeing all of the opportunity in it. So it actually becomes, it was not difficult to get buy-in for it. And maybe I just hit at the right time, and maybe it'd be more difficult another day, but it really just kind of happened very naturally.
All right, great. So we have one more question, and that is, do you use modularity, and then parentheses, many multiple smaller contracts that requires cooperation between suppliers? And are there any particular challenges?
Yeah, no. So modularity is a good one. We are again, things that we're doing through Innovate tend to be smaller, self-contained, and very what we call agency specific. If I need if this is like a PeopleSoft size problem, I don't want 20 entrepreneurs all having to work with each other to build a major solution for us. It's hard enough to do that with the major vendors, right? Getting Microsoft and Oracle to play along is hard enough. If I have to go and herd up a whole bunch of small little entrepreneur folks, this may not go well. So we're pretty clear your solution has to be pretty distilled into something that fixes one specific problem. The only place that we do require some modularity is around data and reporting. So if you're pulling data in, I need the ability to query that and pull that into other statewide systems. Usually the problem is more the other way. They need to tap into other systems. So we do that. The data exchanges, we absolutely will help them handle, and in many cases we'll simply do for them. Modularity between different applications, we so far have been able to avoid having to do that. I'll tell you, I almost think once you start throwing something in at that layer of complexity, that's where I think Innovate starts to be not a great place to do this. You need to go back to your normal purchasing places. I think is the way that would end up.
All right. So I lied. We have one more question, and that is, have you ever had challenges submitted and not gotten responses? And how do you encourage participation in the program?
Yeah, great question. And that's one we're still asking ourselves. So when we first started this, I said the problem was going to be getting entrepreneurs to reply and to get involved. It turns out that has not been the problem. They thought the problem was going to be that government wouldn't have enough problems for them to work on. I assure you that was not then, nor is it now, the problem. We still have plenty of issues that they can help us with. What's been interesting is we had to kind of tailor who we were targeting with our messages. And the one place that Oklahoma, I can tell you, is missing is what I'll call the true entrepreneur. The person that can look at that and say, okay, I need this much cash. Here's the right people. We need to put business processes around this. How are you going to market it? The technology people were there and ready to go. But the difference between two great coders with a good idea and a business is a whole bunch of other legal support, marketing. And those are the people that initially were missing in our engagement. And so what we've been working on now is to go back and hit those people and helping them understand how they can contribute, how they can get involved and where they're needed. So we're continuing to, as we go through this, try and figure out who we're going to target and then how do we do it. Most of what we've done so far, we have I want this program to be very much like the entrepreneurs we talk to every day. We bootstrap everything. I don't have a huge budget. I don't have a dedicated staff on this. And I certainly don't have money to go use marketing or consulting firms, as much fun as that would be. So we try and get plugged in with all of the community events, and we try and attend them. We try and speak at Million Cups of Coffee. I think I've done 10 of those across the state. We go to the chambers of commerces, those sorts of things. So it's really all, where are you free and what can I do with a telephone and a car drive out to talk to people. I don't know if that answers your question enough or not.
Yeah. All right. Great. Well, I don't think we have any more questions. So at this point, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Justin, thank you so much for being willing to take some time out of your day to talk to us more about this innovative project. And I think we've all learned a lot of insights from what you've shared with us today. So I really appreciate that. And everybody that attended today, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to attend this webinar. And like I said, if you all need that continuing education credit, shoot me an email and I'll be happy to get that to you. But other than that, that is all for today. So thank you all so much, and I hope you all have a great week.